The subject of this webinar is Power Automate Essentials, Simplifying Your Daily Processes. Now, if you've been attending our previous webinars, if you think all the way back to June, which feels like so long ago now, before the summer, we looked at maximizing efficiency with intranet workflows and Microsoft 365. So the idea of that one is we were talking about Power Automate, the 365 Power Automate, and how that can help you automate your workflows within your organization. We looked at some real life examples of flows. So it was a very high level overview where we looked at the sorts of things that Power Automate can help you manage. And we looked at how that could then interact with a SharePoint intranet. So if you had an intranet within your organization, how you were able to generate workflows that then kind of manage that SharePoint, the processes within that SharePoint. So that was a very high level overview of Power Automate. And then last month in September, we had a look at Microsoft Forms, and we did quite a detailed look at Microsoft Forms, and we looked at how you can use Microsoft Forms to create forms and quizzes, and we looked at how you can create questions. If it's a quiz, you could create scoring, how you could share that, how you could set up your branding, and how you could review your results and your responses. And we looked briefly how that could fit in with other 365 apps as well. So, for example, using forms in emails within Outlook to create polls, embedding a form into SharePoint so that users can just log into your intranet and the form's right there for them to complete. And also how forms integrated with Excel as well. So all of that kind of comes together, hopefully, in this session today. And what we're going to do is we're going to look more at Power Automate. So we're going to look more at it in more detail and actually what it takes to create a flow within Power Automate, what's involved in those processes, how we can add our triggers, add our steps. And as an example, we are going to look at how that links with Microsoft Forms. Because a lot of the time, if we have a form or quiz, it's usually part of a larger process. You know, someone's completing a form and then maybe we need to send the results to someone, and that might then trigger something else. Or if we've got a quiz, maybe we want to generate a certificate, add some details onto an Excel spreadsheet. So we're going to kind of bring that all together. And like I mentioned a minute ago, in case you hadn't joined yet, these two sessions and all of our previous sessions are on YouTube if you missed them and you want to go and take a look. So objectives for today, we want to be able to understand the role of Power Automate, including its key features and its benefits. We are going to look firstly at how we would actually prepare kind of our resources and the different apps before we begin building the flow in Power Automate. So we're going to look at how we would make sure we have our form ready, any Excel files and anything else we might need. We'll then look at actually how we can create a flow, and today we're going to look at an automated flow. So an automated flow, if you remember back from June, is where we have something called a trigger. So the flow only runs when it's triggered. So we're going to use an automated flow. The other types of flow we have are things like scheduled flows, which would run at a certain day at a certain time, or instant flows, where the flow would just run when we press the button. But we're going to look at automated flows today, and we're going to look at adding and editing those actions within the flow. We're also going to look at one of the huge benefits of Power Automate, which is the ability to test our flows. We would never launch a flow without testing it. Trust me, you can build a flow and think it looks perfect, and then you test it and realize you've missed something out or something's gone horribly wrong. So we're always going to go through and test it, and importantly, what to do and how to troubleshoot those flows if they don't work, and how to go in and resolve them. So just a very brief recap, if you missed the session back in June, what is Power Automate? If you've not seen it before, it's a Microsoft 365 app. All of the basics within Power Automate are included within your 365 subscription. And then the idea is we're automating workflows. So we're able to link in different apps and create kind of an automation, a process, and different steps that is going to move through. Our flows are stored in the cloud, so when we access Power Automate in a moment, we're going to go in using our browser and we'll be able to create our flow within there. There is another part of Power Automate called Power Automate Desktop, but that takes an additional license, slightly different. We're not going to look at that today. Different types of flows, which I've mentioned. We've got automated with trigger, we've got instant, and we've got scheduled. Different actions, which is essentially the steps that the flow moves through, and also it's possible to have conditions as well. So we'll actually look at an example of one today. We can say, for example, if the individual has answered A to question 1, then go down this route and do these steps, and if they've answered B to question 1, then we're going to do a series of other steps, so we can create those conditions, those kind of branches. There's lots of different connectors, so most of the connectors that you'll be using will be Microsoft 365 apps, so Planner, Excel, Word, Outlook, Teams. There are third-party connectors as well. So for example, if you use a document management system, it's possible that there is a connector for that document management system within Power Automate. You might be able to generate some processes from that. And like I mentioned, we've got the troubleshooting and testing capabilities as well. We did also in this session in June talk about how you can create a new flow from a template, and also you can use Copilot to create a flow for you. So you can just type in what you want to do, click go, and the magic of Copilot works it out, puts the steps in for you. Obviously you can go in and edit them if they're not quite right, but it provides that starting point. We're not going to use those today. We are going to create a flow from scratch because I think it's important to know exactly how to start and how to manage it completely from scratch on your own. So why would we use Power Automate with Microsoft Forms? It's creating an automated process. Like I said, often with a form or quiz, it's usually part of a large workflow anyway. We can set up the flow so it's triggered automatically when a response is received. So as soon as someone submits a response to our form or quiz, Power Automate will automatically say, yep, okay, we've got a response, let's move through and move through the processes in the flow. We're able to access advanced functionality. So with Power Automate, we can include those other connectors, so the other 365 apps, which can become part of that workflow. We can add conditions as well. We're improving our efficiency and accuracy. So if you do have a standalone form or quiz, what's happening to it once someone's completed it? Is someone else going in, copying and pasting the answers into a Word document, or is someone remembering to then, I've got to go and email this person and tell them that this is what so-and-so said on a form. And obviously with that, it's taking time and there's a possibility for making errors as well. And troubleshooting and testing, so we're getting that and making sure that any issues are resolved. So before we actually go in and create our flow, there's a few things we need to make sure that we've set up. The first thing is, if we're going to be using forms within our flow, we need to make sure that we've already created that form or quiz in Microsoft Forms. Because when we go in and create the flow, one of the first things it's going to ask us is, which form are we looking at? Which form are we waiting for the response for before we trigger these other steps? So we need to have that form created already. It needs to have a good name at the top so that when we're selecting it in Power Automate, it's obvious which one we're choosing. There's then potentially an Excel file that you'll need to set up. So if you remember from last month, you can, when you're looking at your responses within Microsoft Forms, you have got the option to sync those responses with an Excel workbook. And that means every time there's a response, Forms will automatically copy that response into an Excel workbook that's stored in OneDrive. So you can obviously provide access to other individuals if other people in your team need to access that as well. And if that's all you need, that's fine. We don't need to kind of create another Excel spreadsheet. But if you're looking to create a wider flow that's going to go in and read from that spreadsheet, or perhaps you've got a spreadsheet that already exists and you want to take the responses from the form and put it into an existing workbook rather than one that's been generated by forms, then we will need to go in and create a new one. So we'll do that as part of the demo today, just so that you can see what that will look like. The Excel file must be, the data must be formatted as a table. I'll quickly show that to you in a minute in case you're not sure. And that table will need to have a suitable name because, again, it's going to be referenced from our flow. The columns in the table will need to match any questions that you are looking to copy the responses from. So I'll cover that off in a moment. Any additional columns you might need, so maybe you're going to have a column which performs a calculation or something like that, or a bit of additional information, we'll make sure those are in there as well. And it needs to be saved either to OneDrive or SharePoint so that, again, it can be accessed by Power Automate. The final thing is plan your steps. So it's really easy to go on to Power Automate and just kind of start playing around, think, oh, maybe we could do this, maybe we do that. But the best flows are going to start where you know what you want to do. You've got your steps in mind. The steps I've written there is just something about where someone completes a quiz, whether they're going to get a certificate. And then that means when you go on to Power Automate, you really know what you want to do, which connectors you want to use, and the other apps that you're going to be using as well. So what we're going to do in the demo coming up next is we're going to create a basic flow to manage Microsoft Forms responses. We'll then go in and edit the flow, and I'll show you how you can edit the steps, delete the steps, some more advanced steps, and also the use of conditions. We'll then look at testing and troubleshooting. So I will deliberately break the flow so that we can see what happens when it goes wrong. And right at the end, I'm going to discuss sharing a flow, because a lot of the time when you're setting a flow up, you think, actually, if I'm on annual leave next week, I'm going to need someone else in my team to be able to go in and manage this and, you know, edit it if something goes wrong. So I'll talk about that as well. So let's go into the first thing I just want to show you, because I'm just speaking briefly about the Excel file, is this is the file that I've set up to be used in my flow for the responses to my form. Now, the form I'm using is, if I just pop it to this one, it's the form that we created in the last webinar. So this form here is feedback on your first week at Quiss. So it's aimed at individuals who've just started working at Quiss. They're at the end of their first week, and we're looking for feedback about things like their induction, you know, what their experience is with their manager, their team, and so on. So the Excel file that I've created, the columns mimic the questions within that form. So where there's a question for their name, we've got a column for name. There's a question about their start date, we've got a column for start date, and so on. It's formatted as a table. So if you're not sure how to do that, you would select your columns, insert table. It will convert it into a table for you. And that just means that when you're clicking on it, you get this table design tab at the end, and you're able to enter in a table name. The default is just table 1. So it's definitely a good idea to go in and name that, particularly if you are going to end up with multiple tables on this workbook. At least we know in our flow which table we're looking to use. I've highlighted a couple of columns. This one in the end is like an additional column. So the date of submission, so the date when they complete the form, that's not a question on here. That's something that is automatically recorded by Microsoft Forms and information that we are able to pull through when we're creating our flow in Power Automate. So that just allows you to see the date and time that the individual completed the form or quiz. These two I've highlighted because if you do ever have something like this in your form or quiz where you've got multiple statements, and then we put, you know, strongly disagree, disagree, agree, strongly agree. Although it's one question within your form, the output that you get will actually be split, and you'll get one answer for each statement. So from here, we're actually going to have 2 outputs, one about the manager and one about the team. So when I'm creating my Excel file, I've got 2 columns for that rather than 1. So just to point that out in case you do have that situation. So that's all set up and ready to go. I've saved that to OneDrive, so we'll be able to grab that when we're using our flow, and we've got our form there as well. So we'll go into Power Automate. Power Automate is just make.powerautomate.com, or you can use your waffle from any of the 365 apps in your browser, and you get to it from there. And I'll go to Create, and I'll click on Automated Cloud Flow, and we need to give our flow a name. So I'm going to call it, I'll just call it New Starter Feedback. And I think I created one earlier, so I'm going to do version 2 just in case it tells me I've already got one with the same name. Because we selected automated, we have to choose our flow's trigger. So what is going to trigger this flow to start? And ours is this one here, which is right at the top, because I think it's probably one of the most common ones that people use. When a new response is submitted, and we can see underneath there, it's using the app Microsoft Forms. You can see there's other things as well. So if you're using SharePoint for your intranet, you might have you might be able to use triggers like this. So when an item is created, so that would be in a list or library. When an item is created or modified, we've got things for OneDrive, we've got some Microsoft Teams. So there's lots and lots of options in here, and you can search as well, either for a trigger name or an app. So we'll select when a new response is submitted. We'll click Create, and it will take me through onto my flow. So this is like our kind of area where we're going to start building our steps. This is my trigger at the top. Now, whenever we've created a trigger or whenever we start adding steps, we always have to click on that trigger or step to show the properties on the left-hand side and complete any information. So the first thing it's asking us is quite simply which form are we looking for a response for before this flow will be triggered. And that is simply a drop down, and I can go into here, and as you can see, I use forms quite a lot. I can go in there and find the flow, the form that I want to use. So it is called feedback on your first week at Quiss. So I'll select that one, and then in order to add a new step, I'll click plus, and then I'll be able to go and search for an action in here. You can see it's suggesting some. So again, it's listing different connectors that I've got access to. It's allowing me to use things like controls or conditions, some other things I'll talk about a bit later on. But the main thing you'll probably be using when you come into here is just using the search bar. So again, either to search for an app or to search for the name of an action. So the action that I will use next is to get a response. So whenever we're using our trigger that's pulling or that's triggered when someone submits a response within Microsoft Forms, if we then want to use the information from that response, we have to add in this additional step called Get Response Details, which sits under here under Microsoft Forms. So I'll click on that one, and it's added in that action. And again, on the left-hand side, it's showing us the information that we have to complete. The first one, again, is it's just asking us which form are we looking at, which form are we getting the responses from. So again, I'll come into here and I will go to feedback on your first week at Quiss. This one underneath the response ID. So this is saying, okay, we're looking at this form, but which response do we want? Which response are we getting the information from? Now, the response we're getting the information from is the response that's triggered the flow to start with. So where it's looking for a response ID, we need to click on this kind of lightning bolt just there. And the lightning bolt allows us to insert what's called dynamic content. And dynamic content looks back at any previous steps or triggers within the flow, and it shows us any information that we can pull through to this particular action. So because our previous trigger is about a response being submitted, it's allowing us to pull the response ID from that trigger. So if I click on that one, it pops in the response ID into that field. And you can see that it's this dynamic content because it's got a box around it and the little forms icons. It's not something I've just typed in, it's something that I've selected. So when the response is submitted, we're getting the response details from that response. And what are we going to do next? So I'll click the plus. Now, technically for the form, for the flow that I'm creating, we don't really need to insert this information into Excel, but I'm going to add that as a step anyway, just so that you can see how it works, and if that is something you want to do, would need to do, then you understand the process that's involved in it. So in order to grab our response details and put them into an Excel workbook, I would search in here for add a row into a table, or if you forget what it's called, you can just type Excel or Excel table, and it would bring up a list of results. And we've got that one here, add a row into a table. And when you're searching, you really suddenly get to see how many different actions and connectors there are, because I can see as well there's things like update a row, get a row, list rows present in a table, delete a row, and these are just the results for this. If I went in to see more, and if I search for oops, if I just go back, if I search for a whole app like Excel, for example, we can see that there's multiple actions in here. So creating table, creating new worksheets, there's lots and lots of different things that we can do. But we use add a row into a table. And again, we'll go in and we'll fill in the fields in here. So the location is going to be the location of that Excel file. So we're using the drop down, and it's either going to be stored in OneDrive, in a SharePoint site, or if you've saved it within a group. So if you saved it within Teams, for example. So we'll go into, I've stored this one in the demo team. Have I stored it in the demo team? No, I've stored it in my OneDrive, didn't I? Let's go back. OneDrive. The document library. So if it's OneDrive, it's just OneDrive. If it was SharePoint, then you'd have all of the different document libraries that you have in there. And then I'll use the browse to find a file. So I stored it under first week feedback. And then we've got the Excel file here. So that's selecting the Excel file. The next question it's asking is which table are we going to insert this data into? So this is where it's really important, firstly, that you created the table, and secondly, if you've got multiple tables, that you gave it a good name. So our feedback table. Now at that point, it kind of looks like we've done everything because we filled out all of the necessary information. However, and it's always worth checking whenever you add a trigger or an action into your flow, where it says advanced parameters, it's always worth clicking show all, because these are items that aren't mandatory, but that really provide that extra input into that particular action. And for this one, it really is necessary, because this is where we are putting that data. So in here, might recognize these are the names of my columns in my Excel file. Yeah, name, start date, department, and so on. So that's the same here, name, start date, department. So what I'm doing is I'm clicking into this field for name. I'm going to use that dynamic content again, and then in here, because it's looking at my previous steps in my flow, including the one where we're getting the response details, I can start to see the questions from my form. I can only see some of them, but if I click see more, I can see all of them. So what I'm doing is I'm going to match the question from my form to the column in my Excel file. So where it says name, I'll click on name. Where it says start date, I'll go to dynamic content. If I can't see it, I can click see more, or there's a really useful search bar at the top, so we can just type into it, insert that into there. Department, same process. So I'm clicking in here, department, whether they're office or remote, and their training rating, a ranking of experiences. These are the two questions where they're putting like strongly disagree, agree, and so on. So those I split into two. So team, how likely you are to recommend Quiss as an employer. Is that one there? Now this last column, if you remember, I said I kind of added this column in. It's not actually a question within the form, but I would like to know when the individual submitted their response, and that's still here under this details area. Rather than a question, if I just click see more, we've got this submission time. So that's not a question within the form, but it's telling me that it's just going to gather that timestamp when a new response is submitted, and I can put it into that. The other item that we can grab from this get response details step is the responder's email. Again, that wasn't a question in my form, but if your form settings are set so that only internal individuals can complete the form or quiz, then it will automatically record their email address for you without you having to add that as a question on the form. So I'll put in submission time, and that's added in there. So we've now got that step. Couple more steps I want to add before we go through and just do a test of this one. So I just want to show you some sorts of notifications that you can add, because some of the common questions I get when I'm training on Power Automate is, okay, but we want to send an email to this person, or we want to tell this person that someone submitted a response. So I'll click the plus. Really simple way of notifying people, of course, is by email. So if I search for send an email, and then we'll use 365 Outlook. There are other mail options as well, but if you're using Outlook, then it will be this one. Send an email, and then the options on the left side here are going to be all about what that email is, who it's going to, the subject, the body, and so on. So when I'm putting in who it's going to, I always, when I'm setting up a flow, I always make sure it's going to myself. Once it's tested and it's all working, I can come back and put in the actual individuals. But for now, I'm just going to make sure that I'm the person that's getting all those emails. You can put in multiple email addresses. So you could, if there's multiple emails to be sent, you can do it all within one step. Subject, so we could put something like new response from, and we can still use our dynamic content within here. So where it's saying new response from, we can use that icon again, go back to our get response details and click on name, for example. So it's a little bit more personalized. It's giving a little bit more information. Exactly the same in the body of the email. I was carrying out some work the other day for someone who wanted, it was like a new starter form, and someone was going in and submitting requirements for a new starter, and they then wanted all of that response to go just into an email. So it would just automatically email someone, and they could then see those responses because they didn't have access to the form. They didn't know how to use forms, so they just have it there in an email for them. So we can absolutely use that dynamic content again and start putting in, this is their name, this is, their first day, is this date, and we can put that information in there. You can put in links. So if you wanted them to go into forms, you could say, see the full response here, and you can add a link into there, and we've got the formatting and so on. So we can put a lot into that. As well, like I mentioned, always check the advanced parameters, because there's actually quite a lot of useful ones in this email action. So things like who the email is being sent from. So again, did some work the other day for someone that was sending out event invites once people RSVP'd on an online form. If they said they were attending, it would automatically email them like the calendar appointment for Outlook that they could insert into their calendar, and they wanted that email to come from like a central email address, so we could do that. We can do copy, we can do blind copy. We've got the option to put in attachments as well, sensitivity, who the reply is to if the individual replies, and the importance as well. All of these you can use dynamic content. So if it's an attachment, if you've got a file in a previous action, we could grab that file from that previous action. If we're maybe copying someone in that was previously mentioned in one of the steps, we can go in and grab an email address from there. So there's lots and lots of options that we've got. Another type of notification is, of course, through Microsoft Teams. So I think more and more people now would rather get their notifications through Teams than Outlook. And I think a good example is when you've got perhaps a group of people, let's say HR, for example. So rather than sending individual emails out to everyone in HR, why not just send a single notification into their Teams channel or into some kind of group chat? And then because that's within a chat, they can then kind of talk to themselves within that conversation, rather than each getting a separate email and then them each having to go into Teams and message each other about that. So we'll also do post a message in a chat or channel. So this is Microsoft Teams. Again, we can see the other types of actions we can get within Teams, lots and lots of different options. So post message in a chat or channel. What do we want to post as? If you want it to be kind of neutral, it's just a Flowbot, you can post it as yourself. I think that can get a little bit confusing because people wouldn't perhaps understand if it was coming from you at that time or whether it was an automated process. So I tend to choose a Flowbot. And then where we're posting it, are we posting it into a channel? Are we posting it into an individual private chat with a Flowbot? Or are we posting it into a group chat? We're going to just do a private chat for now, so I can show you how that works. And when we click outside of that field, it's then saying, okay, so because of what we've selected, we need to go and fill in who is the recipient. Again, you can use dynamic content if you've got a name or an email address in a previous action. I'm again just going to set it up with myself for now. What the message is, again, we can use our dynamic content. So we could put, you know, so and so has submitted whatever it is. Advanced parameters, I don't think, yeah, that's, well, leave that one for now. So that's the most important bits for the Teams notification. So what I'm going to do is I'll save this so far and we'll see how it works. So once it's saved, what I will do to test it is I'll go onto my form. I will preview and I will just really quickly submit a response to my form. And what this should do is then trigger that flow. Submit. Okay. So what I should get in a minute is an email and also I'll get, there we go, a message on Teams. So here is the email. So we can see the text that we put into here, the subject line where it's put in the name, which was test. So that email's come through. Let me just check my Teams. Here we go. So this is what it looks like when you send the response through from this Flowbot. It comes through into a chat. So just in the chat area, if you haven't got one already, it creates it automatically. This chat called workflows, and there we've got our message. And like I said, there could be extra information there. There could be a link to click on, whatever you want to do with it. But that came through pretty much instantly, which is brilliant. So that's all working okay. We'll have a look at a few of the other options that we can add in. Once we've started creating our flow, we can go in and edit any of the steps. So we can right click on a step, we can delete it, you can copy an action. So if maybe there was another step later on where maybe I needed to copy the information into another table, rather than creating that action from scratch, I can right click, copy the action, and then if I right click on the plus icon, there's the option to paste an action and it will paste it into there. You can rename your actions as well. So particularly if you have maybe a few actions that are similar or the same. So this says add a row into a table, and this says add a row into a table 1. You can click on the name up here and say, you know, add a row into feedback table, just to give it, just to make it a bit more clear when you're working on it. And particularly if you're sharing a flow with someone else who's going to be working on it, it makes it a little bit easier for them to see, okay, this is exactly what's happening at this particular step. So there's a few different edits, and of course we can click on any step and go in and edit the information in here as well. There's lots of steps and actions that you can add. So we've seen a few examples already, like the Excel ones. If I just quickly show you some of the ones within Teams, we can use Power Automate to create new chats. We can use them to create new teams. We can use them to create new channels, delete members, list chat, list teams, post a feed notification. So lots and lots of actions within there. We've got actions within Outlook. So obviously we saw the option to send an email, but we've also got things like forward an email, draft an email, get a contact, assign a category to emails. And one of the other really common questions I get when you're looking at Power Automate is, as well as notifying someone or a group of people as part of the flow, a lot of the times people want to assign an action to them. So they'll say, well, now someone's completed the form, I want to make sure that, you know, Sally in HR goes off and does this, or talks to this person, or arranges this meeting. And a really great way of doing that is by using Microsoft Planner. So using Power Automate to maybe create a new task, to edit a task, put a task within a particular plan or within a particular bucket, that can all be done within Power Automate as well. The other one that we'll look at is conditions. So that's under control, or you can search for condition, and it's here. With the condition, we're then obviously creating kind of two branches. So we're able to put in our condition and then say, if the condition is true, we're going to carry out these steps. If it's false, we're going to carry out these steps. So I'm simply clicking on this condition here, this grey box, and it's allowing us to put in the condition here on the left-hand side. Now, just as an example, I'm just going to click my dynamic content. I'm going to say that if in the response in the department question, if the answer they give is equal to finance, because that's one of the options, then we'll move through into the true area. You'll notice that you can add multiple conditions. So I could say departments equal to training or equal to accounts, and you can change the operator at the top as well. So and or but we'll just leave it as that one for now. And then within the true area, I can use that plus icon to set up the actions as I was doing previously. We'll use a SharePoint action just because I also want to touch on some of the actions within SharePoint, because this is another common one. If people want to link it to their intranet pages and files and things within SharePoint. So we've got lots and lots of options here. So the ability to copy a folder, to create a file, to create a new folder, get the properties of a file, move a folder. Now, what I actually want to do is, if I just grab my Teams again, just as another example, I have set up in one of my Teams, in one of my channels, I've set up an Excel file called training log. Now, what I want to do is, if someone responds to the form and says they're within the finance team, this training log is going to contain details of all of the training courses that they need to complete as part of their induction. So every time someone completes the form, I want to create a new folder in here with the name of the new starter, and I want to copy that training log file into the new folder. So essentially every new starter will have a folder with the training log inside it already, again saving us having to do it manually. And then moving forward, if they do their training, we could even set up flows to kind of input their results and things like that for the different training courses that they've completed. So what I'll do under SharePoint is we will use create a new folder, which I cannot see for the life of me, so I'm going to type it in, SharePoint folder, and create new folder. There it is. I'll create a new folder. And then under here, it's asking for the site address. So I'm going to select my Quiss demo team, which is my team's group, list or library. So it's within documents. And then in the folder path, I can use my dynamic content as well. And I'm going to go to, if I'm going to get response details, use their name. So, and I'm just going to put general before it because it's in the documents document library. It's then in the general channel, and then the name of the folder is going to be the name of the individual that submitted the response. So that's going to create the new folder within SharePoint and within Teams. And then the next action is going to be to copy that Excel file. So I'll use the action copy file from SharePoint, copy file. And again, similar steps. So where is the file that we're copying? It's in the demo team. What is the file? So we're going to browse for that file in there. So it's under shared documents. It's under general. And it's the training log. Where is the site address? So it's going to go into the demo team. And the destination folder is going to be the shared documents in the general channel, and then it's going to be the name. So we're going to use our dynamic content. It's going to be the name of the folder that we created in the previous step. So I'm looking in this previous step, create new folder, and you can see there's lots and lots of dynamic content that we can use from that step. I'm going to use name. Oh, and I need a / in there as well, because that's the name of the folder. If another file is already there, what do we want to do? It's really up to you. I'll just say replace. Hopefully it shouldn't happen, but if it does, we'll replace the old one. So those are the steps that are being carried out if the condition is true. You don't have to put anything under false. If you don't want it to do anything, if the condition is false, you can leave it blank, or of course you can go in and add additional steps in there. You can add multiple conditions within each other. So you could have another condition here, for example, and you can also have steps following a condition. So basically, if it's true or if it's false, once it's done anything in there, then it moves through to the actions underneath. So if we save that one, and we will test it again. Now, rather than doing what I did previously, where I just went onto the form and I submitted a response, this time I'm going to use a button at the top here, which is called test. When I'm testing a flow, I've got two options. The first one is I can test it manually. So when I click test, that means I would manually need to go onto my form and submit the response. And when I do that, I would be able to see in real time each of my actions, hopefully getting a little tick next to them to show that they are completed. And it would also show me the time that that action took to complete. So it'll say like 0.2 seconds, for example. So I'll be able to see that moving through in real time. The other option is automatically. And with automatically, if you have previously triggered your flow, which we did a minute ago, we can use the same trigger again. So what it will do is it will take my responses to the form that I did a minute ago and just run it again with the same response. Okay, so if I click test, Again, it's going to switch across into a testing mode. So you can see here, and we start to get those little ticks and the times next to each of the actions. Okay, so it's allowing me to see in real time everything that's happening, and I've just seen on my other screen, I've got my email through, I've got my Teams message. It's just working on copying that file, which sometimes is kind of the longer process, but I'm sure it will complete in a second. Okay, so that allows us, there we go, so that allows us to see each of the actions that have been carried out. And if I go into Teams now, and if I just kind of refresh that files area, there we go, so we've got a new folder with the name of the new starter, and when I click on it, we've got that training login there. Okay, so running that test mode, particularly in that automatic mode, is a lot. It saves you a lot of time from going in and submitting feedback. Of course, sometimes you are going to need to do it manually. So if I wanted to run this again, to save the risk of having two folders with the same name and everything getting a bit confusing, I probably would do a manual response and call it a different name. But a lot of the time using that automatic testing option is going to save you a little bit of time. So we've got the option for testing at the top. Obviously, make sure you're saving it regularly. The other options we've got are, if I just go back, this is kind of like our kind of dashboard for our flow. So we can see things like when it was created. We've got options at the top like deleting it. We can do a save as if we wanted another flow that was perhaps very similar, but we wanted to change some of the actions, we could use save as. And we've also got the option to turn off the flow as well. So if perhaps you don't want to delete the flow, but for some reason you just don't want it running at the minute, you can turn it off. So now if anyone submits a response to that form, it's not going to run, but at a later date I can come in and turn it back on. You've also got underneath all of the times where it has run in the last 28 days. So we can click on, first off, you can see the duration and how long it took, but you can also click on the date and time and it will take you into that test view. So again, you can see, the steps that completed and how long they took. If a test was to fail, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to purposely break the flow. So I'm just going to go into my copy file and I'm just going to basically mess up this destination folder. I'm going to put in a destination folder that doesn't exist. There we go, and I'll save it and I'll just run that test again, just so that we can see what it looks like when an error occurs. So we'll do test. I'm just going to do it automatically again, just so we can show it. And again, it's going to move through the first steps absolutely fine because there's nothing wrong with getting the response details. I've just got the email. But when we get down to our condition, oh, there we go. So we can see straight away there's an error. We've got a lot of red messages coming up and we get that exclamation mark here rather than a tick. We've got the kind of issue at the top, and on the left hand side you've got the details of the error, so you're then able to move through and work out exactly what the input was, what the output was, what the problem is. So this at the top says the system cannot find the file, so we can go in and then click edit and go in and resolve that. And back on that main screen we'll now be able to see that test failed. If your flow fails, you will get an email, but those emails they're not instant. So it might be that you get an email a few hours later, for example, that says, by the way, this flow has failed recently. So it's not particularly quick. There are options, it's kind of outside of the scope of today's training, but there is the option to go in and put something called a run after. So you can say if this particular action fails, send me an email so that you can get that update a little bit quicker. But otherwise, you're not going to be notified straight away. That's why testing is really important, so you can be really confident that that flow is working and identify any issues before you start running it properly. Just checking that covered everything I wanted to say. Oh, another point is to do with, if we just didn't show you my Excel file. This is my Excel file here where it's automatically copying the data across. The office or remote is a question that only pops up, I think, if you say you work in training, which is why that's empty. But we can see the other ones have filled in, the date and time of submission as well. If you have any problems with dates or anything being in the American format, there are actions to do with, I think you can use date time. I think you can also use date operation as well, and you can use functions to convert the date and time. So you can perform calculations and things within the flows. There's so much scope to Power Automate. You can do, you know, days of training on it. We're just doing a very brief overview today. And the final thing I just wanted to mention is the ability to share a flow. So at the top here, we can use the share option, or on the right hand side, and you can go and add a co-owner. A co-owner is someone that has access to the flow, so they will be able to go in and open the flow, edit the flow, essentially all of the options that you've just seen from my side. You can add them in here, so I'll add James, for example, and then it will list him as a co-owner. When I'm adding a co-owner, it will just confirm that you're also sharing your connections. So because I'm using a form from my Microsoft Forms, I'm using an Excel file that is shared, that I'm using, that's stored in my OneDrive. It is just sharing those connections with him. That doesn't mean that he can then kind of go into my OneDrive or anything like that. It just means that he's able to use those connections within the flow as well. If you share your flow with someone else, or someone else shares a flow with you, if I go to my flows, rather than being displayed in this cloud flows area, which is where your flows would normally be stored, they will move across to the shared with me area in here. Okay, and then we can just hover over it, click the edit button, and go back in and edit it again. Okay, so just to pop back into my PowerPoint. Perfect. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an introduction. Like I said, it is hard to kind of cover Power Automate in such a short amount of time. And remember, we've only looked at automated flows. You've also got those scheduled flows where you can say, you know, run this flow every Monday morning at 9 o'clock. And you've also got instant flows, which are flows where you can press a button either online, in Teams, or within an app, and it runs the flow for you. So we haven't even kind of covered those at all. But the idea is still going to be the same. You're going in and you're adding those actions, and you're creating that flow, sharing it, testing it, and so on. So hopefully that's given you some ideas, potential things you might be able to use Power Automate for. As always, we are here to help you. So if you would like any further training on Power Automate, perhaps more general training, or if you have a particular workflow in mind that you're looking to set up, please do let us know. And yeah, or even if you start creating something and perhaps you're testing and it's not quite working how you want it to, again, give us a shout, and we're always more than happy to have a look at it for you. Thank you. Any questions? If I just stop sharing and I'll just go into my... if you have got any questions, please just pop them in either the chat or the Q&A. Can you unshare a flow after a period of annual leave, for example? Yes, really good question. You can. So if I just pop back into my flow here, where I'd added James. So we can go through and quite brutal icon there, the bin. We can put James in the bin, and yes, it will remove his access. He won't be able to access the connectors anymore. He won't be able to access the flow. So yeah, you are able to do that. I can't see any other questions. So thank you for coming along. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful, and hopefully see you at the Quiss Clinic. Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.